ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। Namaste my dear friends. This is 16th video on Sai Gita. In the last video, Satya Sai Baba was narrating a story of the animals living in a vast jungle. After the speeches of animals, the final speech of the president, he says, was the president of that meeting. So what he says, let us see. Through effort, humans can transform their lower nature. The sage addressed the gathering, "Dear animals, all that you have just spoken of is true. Whenever a spiritual teacher does something or says something to us, it is meant for our own good. It is intended to promote our inner development and also our friendship and good understanding with others. But as soon as this friendship flowers and understanding blossoms forth, human beings become suspicious and think that something bad is being done to them. To your face they will offer salutations and use words of praise, but behind your back they will criticize and revile you. Filling themselves with opposites like that and with low forms of cleverness, they waste their intelligence and their lives." All the defects have been pointed out here are certainly true and present in humans. As for good, sleep, breathing and such things, there is absolutely no difference between humans and animals. The sage continued, I do want to point out, however, that there is one specialty in human beings that is unique, in which they cannot be compared with the animals. Animals may inherit a streak of cruelty. Once they have acquired that, they cannot change it. A tiger, however hungry he may be, will not eat rice and curry. He only aspires to have mutton. He will not settle for just a little tea and biscuits. However much he may try to change his habits, he will not succeed. On the other hand, if sufficient efforts are made by humans, they can transform their cruel nature and any of their bad habits. The most important difference between humans and animals is that humans with effort can bring about a complete transformer in themselves, whereas animals will not be able to accomplish that. These special capacities and skills for transforming themselves are only available to human beings. The fox got up and said, Swami, we will concede that human beings have these special capacities for changing themselves. But if they do not make use of these capacities, do they deserve the high status that they enjoy? The president declared, if anyone has the capacity to change himself but does not use it, then he is much worse than an animal. At this, all the animals burst into an uproarious applause. The cheering went on and on until the president gabbled for order. The sage then repeated the principal point he had just made, that any human being who had the capacity for doing good but who do not use this quality to improve their own behavior and develop the good within themselves were without a doubt worse than animals. Then the sage added, what is the use of all the learning that human beings accumulate? Will it change their faith? As soon as bad thoughts enter their heads, their thinking becomes dull and they become like idiots. In learning and skills, humans have attained a high status, but all this learning is only for the sake of procuring some bread. They use their education only to fill their bellies and to eke out at livelihood. All this point the fox got up and added to what the president had just said. In the process of eking out their livelihood, humans use all kinds of unethical means. In this respect, it is clear that we animals are much better than human beings. The fox got carried away by his own rhetoric. He continued for some time on the same theme. We are always here in gaining our livelihood. In all respects, when compared to humans, we are far better. Really, we are the best. He got an exuberant, almost riotous ovation from the whole four-footed assembly. Everyone agreed wholeheartedly with this appraisal and urged the fox on to say more. But now the enthusiasm had exceeded its limits and the president pounded the gavel and called for order. The sage arose and made a few additional remarks. He explained the second major difference that makes human beings unique. He said, man has been able to conquer Maya. He has been able to master illusion. Once he has achieved that, he is able to experience the Atma, his own true divine self. Then he can reach the state of nirvana, the exalted state of eternal bliss. This is a vital difference between humans and animals. The vital difference between human beings and animals. Human beings have the power and also the authority to conquer Maya and totally free themselves from delusion. If man takes the trouble and makes the effort, he will be able to directly experience the Atma and thereby know himself as the divinity that he truly is. With the help of spiritual exercises, he can reach nirvana and be immersed in supreme bliss. In the interest of truth, I have to point out that you animals do not have these powers and potentialities with which human beings have been endowed. The sage added, dear children, in the English language, human beings have been collectively called mankind, using the generic term man. The same is given in Sanskrit as manava. The inner significance of man is that human beings can separate and remove this illusion, Maya. They can get the vision of Atma and immerse themselves in wisdom and joy in the state that is called Nirvana. This then is the meaning conveyed by these letters, man. Their M stands for Maya, removed. A stands for Atma, realized. N stands for Nirvana, attained. Attaining Nirvana means that man becomes one with joy and bliss. So a true human being is always one who has removed the ignorance of Maya, who has had a vision of the Atma and who has become merged in the supreme state of bliss. When the sage had finished, all the animals bowed their heads and there was a deep, reflective silence. They mulled over the words the president had spoken. They had to agree that these were three possibilities which they, in their present forms, could never hope to achieve. But then a question was raised by one bold buck. Have all human beings been able to attain this? The sage responded with a resounding no. He said, only very, very few people care at all about these extraordinary treasures which are their birthright. Most people fritter away their lives never pursuing these invaluable opportunities of human life. Their pursuits reek with selfishness and they treat each other much worse than animals. Although humans have this great capacity for wisdom and bliss, they do not develop themselves in this direction and so they have not been able to derive any real joy from their lives. Most human beings behave even worse than animals. The animals came to a consensus and agreed that these people who do not make any effort at all in these directions are just like them, and there is absolutely no reason for distinguishing them from animals. The sage agreed. Then, on a personal note, the president explained the reasons why he had come into the forest to live. He said, human beings do not care much about these noble qualities. Animals give trouble only to those who give them trouble. Otherwise, they will live in peace with one another. But humans hurt those who do not hurt them at all. Without any reason, they begin to blame and cause trouble, harming people who are unblemished and who have given them no cause for provocation. Humans also enter into kinds of improper work which they have no right to be engaged in. He concluded, it is for these reasons that many true spiritual seekers have become renunciates, have given up the company of man and gone into the forest to live. Humanity is becoming increasingly selfish. Whatever people say, whatever they do, whatever they think is laced with selfish motives. Animals do not have such selfishness. Animals are not harming other animals and accumulating wealth. Therefore, in many ways, humans behave worse than animals. In this context, Krishna said to Arjuna, be a true human being, not one who is worse than an animal. Rise above the animal nature to your true human nature. There are two qualities of animals that you should never have. You are neither a sheep, which is timid and fearful, nor you are a tiger, which is cruel to others. You are a man. You are worthy of higher things. Be fearless. Do not ever allow yourself to be subjected to fear. In truth, you yourself are the divinity. Sorrow and fear can never have any power over you. Whenever you have a firm faith in God, you will be fearless. But if you do not have, there is infinite power inherent in the human heart. But despite such power, you do not have faith in yourself. What is the reason for this? The reason is that you feel separate. You believe that you are different from the divinity. But in truth, the divinity is always inside you as your very core. This same divinity pervades the entire universe. When you develop a firm faith in God, you will never have any fear whatsoever. You will recognize that the God you worship is the one who is present everywhere in whatsoever. You will recognize that the God you worship is the one who is present everywhere in everyone and everything, and also in yourself. That belief will remove all vestiges of fear from your heart. But if you do not have that faith, then you will be ridden with fear. Every moment, every step, you will be afraid. When a truck comes in the opposite direction on the road, you will be afraid. Right from the very moment when you get up from the bed until you again go to bed, you will be afraid. And even in bed, you will be afraid that thieves might break into the house and steal your belongings. You will be expending your entire time in fear. But this is not the way a human being should live. You should become steeped in the conviction that the divinity is present everywhere and thereby attain utter fearlessness. Your faith in the omnipresent divinity is the key to developing fearlessness. Only when you lose faith will you develop fear. Only when you forget your true self will fear arise. You have forgotten your own true nature. You have forgotten the Atma. You are considering yourself to be this little 5.5 foot body, but the truth is that you are infinite in form and your power is unlimited. When you make an effort to remove the delusions and get a vision of the Atma, you become immersed in the bliss of Nirvana. then you can call yourself a real human being. If you make no effort along the path of self-realization but demean yourself into dark selfish pursuits and degenerate behavior, you become more like a demon than a human being. Do not fall to such depths. Conduct yourself life so that you can truly call yourself a human being and live up to the high ideals that you inherited when you were given this sacred human birth. Develop good qualities and gain the grace of the Lord. One of the names Krishna used to address Arjuna was the one who delights in being engaged in work. The most of you are given some work to do, you quickly get disgusted with it. When Sunday comes and you have a day off from work, you are happy. But if every day came when Arjuna had no work, he would be very unhappy. Arjuna always felt a great deal of joy and delight when he worked. The different names Krishna used for Arjuna in the Gita are associated with various noble qualities and virtues. You will be able to understand the nature of the divinity if every day you take up one virtue and try to incorporate it in your life. Patience, forbearance, compassion, and non-violence are some of the qualities that have already been taken up in this chapter. Now you have also learnt about fearlessness. There are a number of other important qualities. Only when you develop these qualities in your daily activities will you be able to earn the grace of the Lord. Without developing these noble qualities, you will not be able to gain a place in God's house, irrespective of the education, position, and wealth you have been able to earn. A person is not permitted to go to another country without a passport. Similarly, in order to earn the grace of God, your good qualities serve you as your passport. You must develop these qualities. Along with your education, you should also acquire good habits and sterling character. Without these, all your education will be of no use. This education you are now pursuing is only useful for living in the physical world. It will not take you to God. In the world of today, scientists have been able to glean a number of secrets from nature. But have they been able to gain peace of mind? Have they been able to get joy and happiness from the machines they developed? Happiness and peace cannot come from these. You can get peace only from the divinity. The worldly happiness and peace you get is but momentary and impermanent. It cannot take you to the state of permanent bliss. The wisdom chapter of the Gita emphasizes the practice of recognizing the one all-pervasive divinity that is always very near to you. This chapter is a very long one. There are 72 verses in it, but you will not be able to get rid of your sorrow by just learning these verses and merely chanting them every day. That will not be of much use to you. You will have to make a very strong effort to practice the inner meaning of these verses and apply them constantly in your day-to-day experiences. Only when you practice them in your daily life and make them your own, you will be able to earn the grace of God. And be forever united with Him. Turn towards God and God will turn towards you. When you develop your power of discrimination and become fully awake to the indwelling divinity, you will not suffer sorrow nor be subjected to fear. But as long as you have attachment to the body and attachment to objects, fear and suffering will be with you. Therefore, Krishna told Arjuna to develop his discrimination and rid himself of body consciousness. He told him that once he was free of body consciousness, he would be able to develop integral vision. embodiments of love. Mankind today has three types of vision. The first is body-oriented vision, which is totally superficial. When you have this kind of vision, you see only the external appearance of others, such as the clothes and the ornaments they wear, their facial features, their body characteristics, their peculiarities of speech, etc. This type of vision is oriented only towards the phenomenal world. The second kind of vision is insightful vision. Instead of focusing on the external characteristics of others, you focus on their inner feelings, particularly as it is reflected in their behavior and expressions. You gauge the thoughts in another's mind and the feeling in their hearts by carefully watching what they say and do. When you have this kind of vision, you become concerned primarily with the deeper feeling and motivations of other person's sacred vision. The third kind of vision is integral vision. With this kind of vision, you do not concentrate on another's external features or even their inner feelings. When you have integral vision, you see the divine consciousness that pervades everyone, the inner unity that prevails everywhere despite body differences and differences in expression and emotional makeup. You realize that feelings, thoughts and behavioral characteristics all undergo change and transformation, but you are not interested in characteristics that change with time. With integral vision, you are wholly oriented towards the unchanging, indwelling divinity. Such a deep inner vision is a sacred vision. When you have this, you are in the hands of God. More than that, not only you are in the hands of God, but verily you become God Himself. The truly wise say that one who knows God becomes God. As you perceive, so you become. Therefore, when you gain integral vision, you take on the sacred nature of the divinity itself. To become a person of the highest wisdom, you must develop integral vision. You must steadily abide in the inner unity that is at the core of all the outer diversity. It is for this reason that Krishna commanded Arjuna to steadily turn his vision towards his highest self and to maintain that vision at all times under all circumstances. Chariot festivals. In India, there has been a tradition from ancient days for temples in villages and towns to conduct chariot festival. During these festivities, the idol of the deity installed in the temple is taken in procession. First, a huge chariot is constructed for this purpose. Then the chariot is elaborately decorated and beautiful seat is provided therein for the deity. On the auspicious day, the deity is transferred from the temple to the chariot with appropriate rituals and incantations. The chariot is then taken through the streets in a colorful procession pulled by devotees and preceded by groups of dancers, musicians and singers. Along the course of the procession, many people offer worship to the deity by lighting sacred lamps and waving them as the chariot comes by. During these festivals, thousands of people gather coming from all surrounding villages. Three kinds of people come. The first kind, which constitutes the bulk of the people present for the festival, concentrate all their attention on the chariot and its external appearance. Then there are others who concentrate mostly on the sacred feelings generated by the procession, such as the fervent piety of those who are pulling the chariot, the ecstatic joy of the dancers and singers, and the reverence of the priests and devotees who are offering worship. Thirdly, there are a few who recognize the real purpose for which this festival has been arranged. Only this small handful cares to have a vision of the indweller, the sacred person who is seated in the chariot. Of course, the festival is being celebrated for the purposes of installing the image of God in the chariot. Without the representation of God, the festival would have no meaning. This sacred figure inside the chariot Chariot represent the indweller who is God himself, but only the rare individual will turn his full attention towards that divinity. Most people will see only the physical appearance of the chariot, its decorations and other such things as the fine raiment put on the sacred image inside, the costumes worn by the dancers and musicians, and all the sound and color of the festivities. The largest number will concentrate only on these external things, but there will also be some people who concentrate their attention on the rituals of worship and the offerings being made, such as the breaking of coconuts, the waving of lamps and incense, and the devotion expressed through these rituals. The number of people with this kind of vision and interest will be much smaller than those who concentrate on the decorations, the dances and the dramas, and all the external paraphernalia associated with the festival. But the divine person who has been installed in this chariot, who is driving this chariot, and who is the resident of this chariot will be seen by only a very small number of intensely devoted people who yearn to have the sacred vision of the divinity. In the huge throng turning out for the festival, such people may be counted on the fingers of one's hand. For them, all the outer trappings and all the sound and excitement of the process will only get in the way of their having a real vision of God. All they long for is to see and be with their beautiful Lord, whose representation is seated in the chariot of the human body. What is the deeper meaning of this chariot? How many such chariots are there? The chariot that is being spoken of here is the human body. So there is not just one chariot but millions upon millions of chariots. Every day these chariots move from state to state and house to house, taking the indwelling resident in procession. You have been developing your vision in such a way that you see only the body and its external features or the expressions arising from various feelings and emotional states. But you have not learned to develop the internal vision, the vision which perceives the indwelling person in this chariot of the body and understands who he really is. It is very rare individual who attempts to look deeper beyond the external and superficial aspect of the body and beyond the emotional and mental traits of the individual to try to discover the sacred divine principle which is there inside. The bodies of human beings are not the only chariots. The bodies of animals like dogs or tigers or elephants are also chariots. In fact, the body of every being is a chariot. For example, Lord Shiva is depicted as riding on Nandi, the bull. The bullock is Shiva's chariot. Yet when you see a bullock, you do not think of Lord Shiva. Still he will be seated there. When you see a rat, you will not be thinking of Ganesha, the elephant god, who represents the aspects of protection and wisdom in the divinity. Lord Ganesha will be there riding on that rat. The rat is his vehicle. So it is also a chariot in which God is installed. In a similar way, lions, crows, dogs, snakes, eagles, and so many other animals and birds are used as vehicle for the many different aspects of God. In truth, every living being is a chariot taking God in procession. These days you are developing the vision that sees only the chariot. You are focusing all your concentration on the external decorations. In this age, almost your entire time is spent on adorning the chariot and seeing to the comforts and pleasures of the body. As a result, you are paying attention only to the external differences and you are not spending any time trying to see the indweller. Therefore, Arjuna, said Krishna, know that all the people about whom you are so concerned are only chariots. They may be grandfathers, they may be brothers, they may be cousins, whoever they may be, they are only chariots. In truth, you are seeing only chariots in the form of these various relatives and teachers. You have been keeping your vision clouded by seeing only the body. But a sacred person like you should not care so much for externals. You must concentrate your mind on the indweller who is seated in every human being. Then only will your vision become sacred. Such sacred visions alone can provide the basis for your victory. Only a person who has sacred vision can achieve success in great undertakings. Arjuna, people are giving the same value to the shadow as they give to that which is casting the shadow. They are giving the same value to the reflection as they give to the one whose reflection they are seeing. But that is not correct. The unchanging sacred principle which has given rise to all these shadows and reflections is the eternal self. It is Atma. Its value is unlimited and beyond all measure. On the other hand, the external beauties of these bodies and all the thoughts and feelings and behaviors that are being manifested in these bodies are all just images. They are only shadows or reflections without any real substance or lasting value. When Arjuna gave so much value to mere reflections, he was displaying his ignorance. His was not a worldly type of ignorance, but ignorance related to the spirit. Arjuna had not developed his inner vision. He was not yet able to discriminate between which is real and that which is unreal. In order to save him from all the misunderstandings and confusion which would inevitably arise when there is a lack of inner vision, Krishna undertook to teach Arjuna the sacred knowledge of the eternal self. Krishna instructed Arjuna in the spiritual exercises which had to be practiced in order to attain his highest wisdom. The field of the heart. Before a farmer can raise a crop in his field, he has to do a great deal of preparations. Before the seeds can be sown, the land must be cleared of brushes, stones and weeds, and then it has to be softened by plowing and irrigation. The farmer must determine what particular type of seeds will grow best on that land and what kind of nutrients would be required to fertilize the soil. When all these preparations are completed, he finally sows the seeds. Therefore, before a crop can be raised, the entire field has to be made ready for cultivation. Stones and weeds have to be dug out and thrown away. Only then can the appropriate seeds be sown to assure a good crop. In a similar way, a spiritual aspirant must also carefully prepare the field of his heart. The same principles of cultivation apply to that field. First, one has to remove from heart all undesirable thoughts and useless habits. They have to be dug up and cleaned out. After that, you have to irrigate the entire field of the heart with the waters of love. These water of love makes the heart soft and cultivable. With the help of spiritual practices, you have to plow the field of your heart and spread the fertilizer of faith in order to make the soil rich and nutritious for the seeds to grow well there. Only when all this has been done will the entire field of the heart be ready for sowing. When the heart is covered with bad weeds of base thoughts, when it is barren, hard and dry and infertile, how can good seeds grow there and have any chance of maturing into a beautiful crop? It is in this connection that Krishna said to Arjuna, Arjuna, you must cultivate and transform the field of your heart. You must root out your external vision, develop a pure and strong flow of love for God. Sow the seeds of God's name in your heart and you will raise a rich harvest of unity consciousness there. For that is what grows best in that field. That is its very nature. Then you will become a man of steady wisdom and attain your spiritual goal. In the garden of your heart, you will be able to enjoy the sacred fruit of liberation. Once you have that, fear can never again trouble you. True fearlessness When you have steady faith and an integral vision, and when you constantly think of the indwelling divinity, you will not become elated by joy nor shrink away from sorrow. It is only then that you will become completely fearless. Fearlessness does not mean the absence of fear. True fearlessness completely transcends fear. It is altogether different and much higher than the mere removal of fear. The latter is a momentary experience. It comes and it goes. For example, if you happen to see a rope lying on the ground after dusk, you might think in the failing light that it was a snake. Fearing that the snake might harm you, you would switch on your flashlight to get a better look at it and see if it is a poisonous snake. But as soon as the light shines on it, you realize that it is not a snake at all but a piece of rope, and with this realization your fear disappears instantly. Here you were subjected to fear and then you became free of fear. Both were just transitory experiences. Fear is only a delusion created by the mind. Lack of fear is also a delusion created by the mind. Mistaking one thing for another leads to fear. Recognizing the mistake and rectifying it leads to the removal of that fear. But true fearlessness is not associated with these two at all. Fearlessness is a permanent state where there is no question of ever experiencing any fear. When you are imbued with fearlessness, you are continuously aware of your own reality. At that point, it would be impossible for you to become subject to fear. You should not consider this quality of fearlessness just the absence of fear. When you are truly fearless, you will not be aware of any second entity at all. You can have fear only when there exists a second object who evokes the fear in you. But fearlessness is always associated with unity consciousness. It refers to non-duality, where there can be no two but always one. Only in the state of non-duality will you be truly fearless. When you forget your true self, you will suffer from fear. When you remember only the world and not God, you will suffer from fear. When you are filled with desires and attachments, you will suffer from fear. When you are deluded by objects, you will suffer from fear. On the other hand, when you are immersed in the transcendental reality, you will be totally free from fear. You will never be afraid of anything. Then you will be truly fearless. Krishna said, Arjuna, there is only one thing you will have to develop. You need not dwell further your vision of the phenomenal world, nor do you need to further develop your mind. You need only to develop the vision of the one existing everywhere in everyone. If you know it and if you remember it, then you will not be subject to this constant cycling between fear and its removal. So long as you have the deluded perspective that the world is real and made up of separate objects, your vision will be clouded and you will be subject to fear. But when you recognize the truth of the unity of the whole creation, you will be forever fearless. A person like you should become wise and never again experience fear. So I end this video here. Thank you, my dear friend, for watching and listening this wonderful video. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe my channel. Thank you. Namaskar, my dear Sai Rams. Namaste.